Hey guys, we're back with Matilda, and we're going to learn about another character. One we've already been introduced to, but we're going to get to know her a little bit more in depth and learn about what she does, and that's Lavender. So here we go with that. In the middle of the first week of Matilda's first term, Miss Honey said to the class, "I have some important news for you, so listen carefully. You too, Matilda. Put that book down for a moment and pay attention." Small, eager faces looked up and listened. "It is the headmistress's custom," Miss Honey went on, "to take over the class for one period each week. She does this with every class in the school, and each class has a fixed day and a fixed time. Ours is always 2 o'clock on Thursday afternoons, immediately after lunch. So tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Miss Trunchbull will be taking over for me for one lesson. I shall be here as well, of course, but only as a silent witness. Is that understood?" "Yes, Miss Honey," they chirped. "A word of warning to you all," Miss Honey said. "The headmistress is very strict about everything. Make sure your clothes are clean, and your faces are clean, and your hands are clean. Speak only when spoken to. When she asks you a question, stand up at once before you answer it. Never argue with her. Never answer back. Never try to be funny. If you do, you will make her angry, and when the headmistress gets angry, you'd better watch out." "You can say that again," Lavender murmured. "I am quite sure," Miss Honey said, "that she will be testing you on what we've meant to have learnt this week, which are your twos times tables. So I strongly advise you to swat up when you get home tonight. Get your mother and father to hear you on it." That means they should study and practice that night. "What else will she test us on?" someone asked. "Spelling," Miss Honey said. "Try to remember everything you have learned these last few days. And one more thing. A jug of water and a glass must always be on the table here when the headmistress comes in. She never takes a lesson without that. Now who will be responsible for seeing that it's there?" "I will," Lavender said at once. "Very well, Lavender," Miss Honey said. "It will be your job to go to the kitchen and get a big jug and fill it with water and put it on the kitchen table here with an empty, clean glass just before the lesson starts." "What if the jug's not in the kitchen?" Lavender asked. "There are a dozen headmistresses' jugs and glasses in the kitchen," Miss Honey said. "They are used all over the school." "I won't forget," Lavender said. "I promise I won't." Already Lavender's scheming mind was going over the possibilities that this water jug job had opened up for her. She had longed to do something truly heroic. She admired the older girl, Hortensia, to distraction for the daring deeds that she had performed in the school. She also admired Matilda, who had sworn her to secrecy about the parrot job she had brought off at home, and her great hair oil switch in which she had bleached her father's hair. It was her turn now to become a heroine, if only she could come up with a brilliant plot. On the way home from school that afternoon, she began to mull over the various possibilities, and when, at last, the germ of a brilliant idea hit her, she began to expand on it and lay her plans with the same kind of care the Duke of Wellington had done before the Battle of Waterloo. Admittedly, the enemy on this occasion was not Napoleon, but you could never have gotten but you would never have got anyone at Crunchman Hall to admit that the headmistress was less formidable than the famous Frenchman. Great skill would have to be exercised, Lavender told herself, and great secrecy observed if she was to come out of this exploit alive. There was a muddy pond at the bottom of Lavender's garden, and this was the home of a colony of newts. The newt, although fairly common in English ponds, isn't often seen by ordinary people because it's shy and murky creature. It's an incredibly ugly, gruesome-looking animal, rather like a baby crocodile, but with a shorter head. It's quite harmless, but it doesn't look it. It's about 6 inches long and has a very slimy greenish-gray skin on the top of an orange-colored belly underneath. It is, in fact, an amphibian, which can live in or out of water. That evening Lavender went to the bottom of the garden and she was determined to catch a newt. There are swiftly... Oh, I keep messing up. I have to slow myself down just like I would tell you guys. They are swiftly moving animals and not easy to get a hold of. She lay on the bank for a long time, waiting patiently until she spotted a whopper. Then, using her school hat as a net, she swooped and caught it. She had lined her pencil box with pondweed, ready to receive the creature. But she discovered that it was not easy to get the newt out of her hat and into the pencil box. It wriggled and squirmed like quicksilver, and apart from that, the box was only just long enough to take it. When she did get it in at last, she had to be careful not to trap its tail in the lid when she closed it. The boy next door, called Rupert Entwistle, had told her that if you chopped off a newt's tail, this tail stayed alive and it grew another newt 10 times bigger than the first one. It could be the size of an alligator. Lavender didn't quite believe that, but she was not prepared to risk it happening. Eventually, she managed to slide the lid over the pencil box, and the newt was hers. Then, on second thoughts, she opened up the lid just the tiniest fraction so that the creature could breathe. The next day, she carried her secret weapon to school in her satchel. Her satchel's like a backpack, basically. She was tingling with excitement. She was longing to tell Matilda about her plan of battle. In fact, she wanted to tell the whole class, but finally decided to tell nobody. It was better that way because then no one, even when put under the most severe torture, would be able to name her as the culprit. Lunchtime came. Today it was sausages and baked beans, Lavender's favorite, but she couldn't eat it. "Are you feeling all right, Lavender?" Miss Honey asked from the head of the table. "I had such a huge breakfast," Lavender said. "I really couldn't eat a thing." Immediately after lunch, she dashed off to the kitchen and found one of the Trunchbull's famous jugs. It was a large, bulging thing made of blue glazed pottery. Lavender filled it half full of water and carried it together with a glass into the classroom and set it on the teacher's table. The classroom was still empty. Quick as a flash, Lavender got her pencil box from her satchel and slid it open just a tiny bit. The newt was lying quite still. With great care, she held the box over the neck of the jug and pulled the lid fully open and tipped the newt in. There was a plop as it landed in the water, then thrashed around wildly for a few seconds before settling down. And now, to make the newt feel more at home, Lavender decided to give it all the pondweed from the pencil box as well. The deed was done. All was ready. Lavender put her pencils back into the rather damp pencil box and returned it to the correct place at her own desk. Then she went out and joined the others in the playground until it was time for the lesson to begin. And here at the end of that chapter is a picture of her putting the newt into the water jug. We have one more chapter for today. It's called the weekly test. So this is when the headmistress is going to come in and give them their math and their spelling test, the one lesson she does a week with them. So we know that the newt's in her water jug, and let's find out what happens. At 2:00 sharp, the class assembled, including Miss Honey, who noted that the jug of water and glass were in the proper place. Then she took up a position standing right at the back. Everyone waited. Suddenly in marched the gigantic figure of the headmistress in her belted smock and green breeches. "Good afternoon, children," she barked. "Good afternoon, Miss Trunchbull," they chirped. The headmistress stood before the class, legs apart, hands on hips, glaring at the small boys and girls who sat nervously at their desks in front of her. "Not a very pretty sight," she said. Her expression was one of utter distaste, as though she were looking at something a dog had done in the middle of the floor. "What a bunch of nauseating little warts you are." Everyone had the sense to stay silent. "It makes me vomit," she went on, "to think that I am going to have to put up with the load of garbage like you in my school for the next 6 years. I can see that I'm going to have to expel as many of you as possible as soon as possible to save myself from going around the bend." She paused and snorted several times. It was a curious noise. You could hear the same sort of thing if you walked through a riding stable when the horses are being fed. "I suppose," she went on, "your mothers and fathers tell you you're wonderful. Well, I'm here to tell you the opposite, and you'd better believe me. Stand up, everybody." They all got up quickly to their feet. "Now put your hands out in front of you, and as I walk past, I want you to turn them over so I can see if they're clean on both sides." The Trunchbull began to slowly march along the row of desks, inspecting the hands. All went well until she came to a small boy in the second row. "What's your name?" she barked. "Nigel," the boy said. "Nigel what?" "Nigel Hicks," the boy said. "Nigel Hicks what?" the Trunchbull bellowed. She bellowed so loud she nearly blew the little chap out the window. "That's it," Nigel said, "unless you want my middle name as well." He was a brave little fellow, and one could see that he was trying not to be scared by the Gorgon who was towering above him. "I do not want your middle name, you blister," the Gorgon bellowed. "What is my name?" "Miss Trunchbull," Nigel said. "Then use it when you address me. Now then, let's try again. What's your name?" "Nigel Hicks, Miss Trunchbull," Nigel said. "That's better," the Trunchbull said. "Your hands are filthy, Nigel. When did you last wash them?" "Well, let me think," Nigel said. "That's rather difficult to remember exactly. It could have been yesterday, or it could have been the day before." The Trunchbull's whole body and face seemed to swell up as though she were being inflated by a bicycle pump. "I knew it!" she bellowed. "I knew as soon as I saw you that you were nothing but a piece of filth. What's your father's job, a sewage worker?" "He's a doctor," Nigel said, "and a jolly good one. He says we're all so covered with bugs anyway that a little bit of extra dirt never hurt anyone." "I'm glad he's not my doctor," the Trunchbull said. "And why, might I ask, is there a baked bean on the front of your shirt?" "We had them for lunch, Miss Trunchbull." "And do you usually put your lunch on the front of your shirt, Nigel? Is that what this famous doctor father of yours has taught you to do?" "Baked beans are hard to eat, Miss Trunchbull. They keep falling off my fork." "You are disgusting," the Trunchbull bellowed. "You are a walking germ factory. I don't wish to see any more of you today. Go stand in the corner on one leg with your face to the wall." "But, Miss Trunchbull—" "Don't argue with me, boy, or I will make you stand on your head. Now do as you're told." Nigel went. "Now stay where you are, boy, while I test you on your spelling to see if you learnt anything at all this past week. And don't turn around when you talk to me. Keep your nasty little face to the wall. Now then, spell right." "Which one?" Nigel asked. "The thing you do with a pen, or the one that means the opposite of wrong?" He happened to be an unusually bright child, and his mother had worked hard with him at home on spelling and reading. And here's a picture of him standing in the corner. "The one with the pen, you little fool." Nigel spelled it correctly, which surprised the Trunchbull. She thought she had given him a very tricky word, one that he wouldn't yet have learned, and she was peeved that he had succeeded. That means she was really upset that he had gotten it right. Then Nigel said, still balancing on one leg facing the wall, "Miss Honey taught us how to spell a new word, a very long word, yesterday." "And what word was that?" the Trunchbull asked softly. The softer her voice became, the greater the danger. But Nigel wasn't to know this. "Difficulty," Nigel said. "Everyone in the class can spell difficulty now." "What nonsense," the Trunchbull said. "You are not supposed to learn long words like that until you are at least 8 or 9. And don't try to tell me everybody in the class can spell that word. You are lying to me, Nigel." "Test someone," Nigel said, taking an awful chance. "Test anyone you like." The Trunchbull's dangerous, glittering eyes roved round the classroom. "You," she said, pointing at a tiny and rather daft little girl called Prudence. "Spell difficulty." Amazingly, Prudence spelled it correctly and without a moment's hesitation. The Trunchbull was properly taken aback. She snorted. "And I suppose Miss Honey wasted the whole of one lesson teaching you how to spell a single word." No, she didn't," piped Nigel. Nigel really doesn't stop talking, does he? "Miss Honey taught us it in 3 minutes, so we'll never forget it. She teaches us lots of words in 3 minutes." "And what exactly is this magic method, Miss Honey?" asked the headmistress. "I'll show you," piped up the brave Nigel again, coming to Miss Honey's rescue. "Can I put my other foot down while I turn around, please, so I can show you?" You may do neither, snapped the Trunchbull. Stay as you are and show me just the same. All right, said Nigel, wobbling crazily on his one leg. Miss Honey gave us a little song about each word, and we all sing it together and we learn to spell it in no time. Would you like to hear the song about difficulty? I should be fascinated, the Trunchbull said in a voice dripping with sarcasm. Here it is, said Nigel. Mrs. D, Mrs. I, Mrs. F, F, I, Mrs. C, Mrs. U, Mrs. L, T, Y. That spells difficulty. How perfectly ridiculous, snorted the Trunchbull. Why are all those women married? And anyway, you're not meant to teach poetry when you're teaching spelling. Cut it out in the future, Miss Honey. But it does teach them some of the harder words wonderfully well, Miss Honey murmured. Don't argue with me, Miss Honey, the headmistress thundered. Just do as you're told. I shall now test your class on the multiplication tables to see if Miss Honey has taught you anything at all in that direction. The Trunchbull had returned to her place in the front of the class, and her diabolical gaze was moving slowly along the rows of tiny pupils. You, she barked, pointing at a small boy, called Rupert in the front row. What is 2 sevens? 16, Rupert answered, with foolish abandon. The Trunchbull started advancing slow and soft-footed upon Rupert in the manner of a tigress stalking a small deer. Rupert suddenly became aware of the danger signals and quickly tried again. It's 18, he cried. 2 sevens are 18, not 16. You ignorant little slug, the Trunchbull bellowed. You witless weed, you empty-headed hamster, you stupid glob of glue. She had now stationed herself directly behind Rupert, and suddenly she extended a hand the size of a tennis racket and grabbed all the hair on Rupert's head in a fist. Rupert had a lot of golden-colored hair. His mother thought it was beautiful to behold and took delight in allowing it to grow extra long. The Trunchbull had great dislike for long hair on boys, as she did for pigtails on girls, and she was about to show it. She took firm grip on Rupert's long golden tresses with her giant hand, and then, by raising her muscular right arm, she lifted the helpless boy clean out of his chair and held him aloft. Rupert yelled, he twisted, he squirmed, and kicked the air, and went on yelling like a stuck pig, and Miss Trunchbull bellowed, 2 sevens are 14. 2 sevens are 14. I am not letting you go till you say it. From the back of the class, Miss Honey cried out, Miss Trunchbull, please let him down. You're hurting him. His hair might come out. And well it might if he doesn't stop wriggling, snorted the Trunchbull. Keep still, you squirming worm. It really was quite an extraordinary sight to see this giant headmistress dangling the small boy high in the air, and the boy spinning and twisting like something on the end of a string, and shrieking his head off. Say it, bellowed the Trunchbull. Say 2 sevens are 14. Hurry up, or I'll start jerking you up and down, and then your hair really will come out, and we'll have enough of it to stuff a sofa. Get on with it, boy. 2 sevens are 14, and I'll let you go. 2 sevens are 14, gasped Rupert, whereupon the Trunchbull, true to her word, opened her hand and quite literally let him go. He was a long way off the ground when she released him, and he plummeted to earth and hit the floor and bounced like a football. Get up and stop whimpering, the Trunchbull barked. Rupert got up and went back to his desk, massaging his scalp with both hands. The Trunchbull returned to the front of the class. The children sat there, hypnotized. None of them had seen anything quite like this before. It was splendid entertainment. It was better than a pantomime, but with one big difference. In this room, there was an enormous human bomb in front of them, which was liable to explode and blow someone to bits at any moment. The children's eyes were riveted on the headmistress. I don't like small people, she was saying. Small people should never be seen by anybody. They should be kept out of sight in boxes like hairpins and buttons. I cannot for the life of me see why children have to take so long to grow up. I think they do it on purpose. Another extremely brave little boy in the front row spoke up and said, But surely you were a small person once, Miss Trunchbull, weren't you? I was never a small person, she snapped. I have been large all my life, and I don't see why others can't be the same way." "But you must have started out as a baby," the boy said. "Me, a baby!" shouted the Trunchbull. "How dare you suggest such a thing?" "What cheek! What infernal insolence! What is your name, boy? Stand up when you speak to me." The boy stood up. "My name is Eric Ink, Miss Trunchbull," he said. "Eric what?" the Trunchbull snorted. "Ink," the boy said. "Don't be silly, boy. There is no such name." "Look in the phone book," Eric said. "You'll see my father there under Ink." "Very well, then," the Trunchbull said. "You may be Ink, young man, but let me tell you something. You're not indelible. I'll soon rub you out if you're trying to get clever with me. Spell what?" "I don't understand," Eric said. "What do you want me to spell?" "Spell what, you idiot? Spell the word what." W-O-T, Eric said, answering too quickly. There was a nasty silence. "I'll give you one more chance," the Trunchbull said, not moving. Yes, I know," Eric said. "It's got an H in it. W-H-O-T. It's easy." In two large strides, the Trunchbull was behind Eric's desk, and there she stood, a pillar of doom, towering over the helpless boy. Eric glanced fearfully back over his shoulder at the monster. "I was right, wasn't I?" he murmured nervously. "You were wrong," the Trunchbull barked. "In fact, you strike me as the sort of poisonous little pockmark that will always be wrong. You sit wrong, you look wrong, you speak wrong. You're wrong all around. I'll give you one more chance to be right. Spell what?" Eric hesitated. Then he said very slowly, "It's not W-O-T, and it's not W-H-O-T. I know. It must be W-H-O-T-T." Standing behind Eric, the Trunchbull reached out and took hold of the boy's two ears, one with each hand, pinching them between her forefinger and thumb. "Ow!" Eric cried. "Ow, you're hurting me." "I haven't started yet," the Trunchbull said briskly. And now, taking a firm grip on the two ears, she lifted him bodily out of his seat and held him aloft. Like Rupert before him, Eric squealed the house down. From the back of the classroom, Miss Honey cried out, "Miss Trunchbull, don't! Please let him go. His ears might come off." "They'll never come off," said the Trunchbull. Oh, that's a picture of him being held up by his ears. "I have discovered through long experience, Miss Honey, that ears of small boys are stuck very firmly to their heads." "Let him go, Miss Trunchbull, please," begged Miss Honey. "You could damage him. You really could. You could wrench them right off." "Ears never come off," the Trunchbull shouted. "They stretch most marvelously, like these are doing now, but I assure you they never come off." Eric was squealing louder than ever and pedaling the air, with his legs. Matilda had never before seen a boy, or anyone else for that matter, held aloft by his ears alone. Like Miss Honey, she felt sure that both ears were going to come off at any moment, with all that weight that was on them. Miss Trunchbull was shouting, "The word what is spelled W-H-A-T. Now spell it, you little wart." Eric didn't hesitate. He had learned from watching Rupert a few minutes before that the quicker you answered, the quicker you were released. "W-H-A-T, he squealed. "Spells what?" Still holding him by the ears, the Trunchbull lowered him back into the chair behind his desk. Then she marched back to the front of the class, dusting off her hands once again like someone who had just been handling something rather grimy. "That's what makes them learn, Miss Honey," she said. "You take it from me. It's no good just telling them. You've got to hammer it into them. There's nothing like a little twisting and twiddling to encourage them to remember. It concentrates their minds wonderfully." "You could do them permanent damage, Miss Trunchbull," Miss Honey cried out. "Oh, I have. I'm quite sure I have," the Trunchbull answered, grinning. "Eric's ears will have been stretched quite considerably by the last couple of minutes. They'll be much longer now than they were before. There's nothing wrong with that, Miss Honey. It'll give him an interesting pixie to look at for the rest of his life. But Miss Trunchbull, oh, do shut up, Miss Honey. You're as wet as any of them. You can't cope in here, then you can go find a job in some cotton wool private school for rich brats. When you have been teaching for as long as I have, you'll realize that it's no good to be kind to children. Read Nicholas Nickleby, Miss Honey, by Mr. Dickens. Read about Mr. Wackford Squeers, the Admiral Headmaster of Dothboys Hall. He knew how to handle little brutes, didn't he? He knew how to use the birch, didn't he? He kept their backside so warm that you could have fried eggs and bacon on them. A fine book, that. But I don't suppose this bunch of morons we've got here will ever read it, because by the look of them, they're never going to learn to read anything. I read it, Matilda said quietly. The Trunchbull flicked her head around and looked carefully at the small girl with dark hair and deep brown eyes sitting in the second row. What did you say? She asked sharply. I said I've read it, Miss Trunchbull. Read what? Nicholas Nickleby, Miss Trunchbull. You are lying to me, madam, the Trunchbull shouted, glaring at Matilda. I doubt there is a single child in the entire school who has read that book, and here you are, an unhatched shrimp sitting in the lowest form there is, trying to tell me a whopping great lie like that. Why do you do it? You must take me for a fool. Do you take me for a fool, child? Well, Matilda said, and then she hesitated. She would like to have said, yes, I jolly well do, but that would have been suicide. Well, she said again, still hesitating, still refusing to say no. The Trunchbull sensed what the child was thinking, and she didn't like it. Stand up when you speak to me, she snapped. What is your name? Matilda stood up and said, My name is Matilda Wormwood, Miss Trunchbull. Wormwood, is it? The Trunchbull said. In that case, you must be the daughter of the man who owns Wormwood Motors. Yes, Miss Trunchbull. He's a crook, the Trunchbull shouted. A week ago he sold me a second-hand car that he said was almost new. I thought that he was a splendid fellow then, but then this morning while I was driving that car through the village, the entire engine fell out onto the road. The whole thing was filled with sawdust. The man's a thief and a robber. I'll have his skin for sausages, you see, if I don't. He is clever at his business, Matilda said. Clever my foot, the Trunchbull shouted. Miss Honey tells me that you are meant to be clever too. Well, madam, I don't like clever people. They're all crooked. You are most certainly crooked. Before I fell out with your father, he told me some very nasty stories about the way that you behaved at home. But you'd better not try anything like that in this school, young lady. I shall be keeping a very careful eye on you from now on. Sit down and keep quiet. That was 2 chapters. The first one very short, the second one very long. So again, this video is longer than planned, but I hope you enjoyed them both. We know something big is coming because we know that newt is still in the jug of water, and Miss Trunchbull hasn't yet taken a sip from it, or poured a glass from it, rather. So we know that something is going to happen with that, but we didn't quite get there yet. We'll have to wait till next time to see what it is. All right, guys. See you later.